Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, brought to you as always by InsideThePenguins.com, a proud affiliate of the Hockey News. I'm your host, Nick Brlansky, joined as always by Nick Horwat, and we have a very, very interesting, very fun show for you guys today. I always get excited whenever I do like a statistic that not a lot of people have, or it's not readily available, especially whenever it comes into the Penguins' favor. We'll talk about that in a little bit here, obviously discussing the Penguins core, primarily about Evgeni Malkin and Kris Letang, and whether or not the immunity that they have in this organization is worn off a little bit thanks to this season and last. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the youngsters coming up for the NHL team, the pool party in the NHL with Sam Poulin and Jesse Puljujärvi, and also Jack St. Ivany turning heads on the defensive side of things. We'll discuss all of that, but also Horwat, it's opening day for the MLB. I know some people don't care. I personally care, and I am ready to be hurt again by the local ball club.
Aren't we all? I keep seeing, I was mentioning this to you before, keep seeing people predicting, including you, predict over 80 wins for the Buccos.
85, yep.
And I can't help but giggle.
That's fine.
It's one of those things that I'll believe it when I see it, and quite honestly, I mean, hey, things do look to be getting better. I know we say this every year, but maybe finally something will break through this year. Henry Davis getting the shot at catcher again. Good stuff. Paul Skeens starting in AA Altoona. Maybe AAA. I'll take it. Oh, he's starting in AAA. I thought I saw
AAA Altoona. Indianapolis. Yes.
Even better. Maybe I won't make the drive out to see him. I'll make the short drive to PNC whenever he's there in a couple of months. Some good things happening. O'Neal Cruz hopefully stays healthy this year. Maybe Key Brian Hayes takes another step with that hitting coach. Did anyone else read that athletic story? Great stuff.
It's
great stuff.
It is. That story was peak Pirates, but hey, it's opening day. Most teams have optimism, even in a sport where most teams shouldn't have optimism for a World Series. This is the type of thing where the only sport where you can see people in the preseason actually telling the general manager of the Pirates, and I saw this, hey, you guys might be a wild card team. Isn't that great? It's like everybody else is going to say, no, this is championship. That's our goal. But baseball is just like, hey, the ceiling for your team because it's right there in the fine print, which is your salary. But
the bar is low for the Buccos too. So hey, who knows? I'm always excited about baseball anyway. Used to be a big family tradition to go to the home opener every year. So
I went one year with you. That was a lot of fun.
Yeah. So we'll see where the season goes. I'm sure I'll be tuning in, keep an eye on the record, and go Pirates.
Go Buccos. I mean, we're ready to talk Penguins here, but obviously, a lot of optimism, and that also means that warmer weather is coming, which is good for everybody involved, even those that aren't baseball fans. But let's talk a little bit about the Penguins, obviously. That's why most people came here. The question of the day is, has the immunity started to wear off for the Penguins core? I think we can both agree that Sidney Crosby is untouchable. His performance has been untouchable. Father Time is looking at him saying, all right, that's fine. I'm going to back away from you a little bit more. 7 points in his last 2 games. Crosby is untouchable, and that much is obvious when talking about the Penguins. But the other two, I heard a little bit of a discussion from NHL Network yesterday talking about Kris Letang and Evgeni Malkin, saying maybe that full no-move clause for both of them, Letang's runs out after 2 more seasons. Maybe that full no-move clause might be a discussion that needs to be had this summer. And I said, it feels a little early for that. What do you think, Horwat?
Yeah, it's still a little soon. It's I get that they're aging. I get that you can see signs of slowing down. You can see signs of regression. But they're still playing at the top of their game. The Kris Letang question is interesting, considering he signed a 6-year deal when he did. Considering the Penguins then brought in Erik Karlsson, who honestly, given the namesake, could probably take over as a number 1 defenseman. The Letang one is interesting because he's the one that we also expected to last longer. So I think seeing any sort of regression from him right now is sort of cause for, maybe this wasn't the smartest idea, but I mean, he's still playing really well. He still had a great start to the season. It's just a matter of keeping up with that heading into next year, because no one has had a good year this year in Pittsburgh, straight up. So it's hard to really say what has gone right and wrong with certain guys. I'd say for Letang, though, he definitely still has what it takes. And That's just the more of the surprising one out of the two. I think we all kind of expected Malkin to start to take steps back. They haven't been as massive as many may have expected, but I'd say soon enough, whether it is beginning or end of next year, I expect him to be a third line center at some point soon, if not a winger. Because, I mean, don't get me wrong, guys like Sidney Crosby can still play at the top of their game and be 1Cs forever, but Evgeni Malkin just doesn't strike anyone as that, and one of these days he'll likely be not sentenced, but reduced down to a third liner or a winger, and for the better, because the team does want to get younger and faster and better players that will need to build into the future. And Malkin taking a reduced role, would show his leadership, but also be smarter and better for the team.
Yeah, I think when talking about these guys, you obviously have to reference who's playing with them. I mean, you look at Kris Letang for one, because I know that's where you started, but you look at Kris Letang, and for the majority of the season, he's been bouncing between Pettersson, good D partner, P.O. Joseph, miscast as a first pairing guy this season, especially in the midst of a sophomore slump, and Ryan Graves, who we know the discussion on Ryan Graves. So you look at that matched with the fact that he was tasked with a different role with Erik Karlsson coming in saying, hey, we want you to be more defense heavy. Don't worry as much about the offensive side of the puck, and him shifting roles at the age of 36, 37 years old. I thought that he played very well through the majority of the season. Like you mentioned, yeah, it all fell apart for Kris Letang. He's had some very poor performances over the past month, but who hasn't on this roster? And then with both of them, when they signed that contract 2 seasons ago, was it not Penguins for life as the first couple of words on those extension alerts? It was Penguin for life. Penguin for life. They're expected to be here for life. That should have put the immunity on them for good. But here we are having this discussion 2 years later. Letang has 4 years remaining on that contract. Like I mentioned, a full no-move clause for the next 2 seasons. Then it becomes a 10-team no-trade list. And Evgeni Malkin has 2 years remaining, both entirely covered with a full no-movement clause. Do you see a scenario where either of them at any point is asked to waive their no-movement clause?
No, I could see Letang maybe in the last year, because at that point Malkin is already probably retired. At that point, who knows exactly what's going on with Crosby? I think this idea of the Penguins shipping out their core is just spawned from the constant discussion and straight up, I don't want to say wrong, but just the speculation of coming from north of the border here, that the Penguins are going to look to trade Sidney Crosby, or that Sidney Crosby is going to want out to compete for a Stanley Cup, whether it be in Montreal and a team that's ready to burst, or with his buddy Nathan McKinnon in Colorado, because none of that is happening. But the fact that those outlets continue to push that idea and continue to speculate that and continue to assume they know what Crosby is thinking. By the way, one of those, that one got me. After who it was, it said Crosby is upset with the team. You don't know that. But that idea has then obviously, right? Because if the Penguins are willing to move on from Sidney Crosby, well, obviously they're willing to move on from the other two, right? That's the sort of snowball effect of that discussion. That's where that is coming from. The immunity is still there. They are not going anywhere. I would say the immunity is worn off in their positioning in the lineup. I think that's a real discussion that can be had, but those three, even those two getting dealt out just straight up doesn't feel likely.
Yeah, what you mentioned there is trickle-down stupidity is what I call it. You know, the Crosby stuff, they said it for weeks and weeks and weeks, and it was refuted by everybody in Pittsburgh that actually knows what's going on, and they finally said, all right, fine, we'll stop talking about the Crosby situation. Oh, let's talk about Malkin and Kris Letang, simply because that's next on the docket right now. I see it's trickle-down stupidity. And you mentioned there that, maybe their immunity when it comes to positioning. Malkin's been the second line center since he entered the league, to be completely honest. And again, Kris Letang worked his way up until Sergei Gonchar left in 2010 and officially then became the team's franchise defenseman. And he's held that role for the past decade plus. But I think the big thing is with Evgeni Malkin. And here's the last thing I'll say on this conversation is that his downfall has been entirely exaggerated. Has he taken a step back? Yes, I think that much is evident. Are the optics not as good as they were before? Yes, I'll give you that. So he can't carry a line alone. That's fine. He's 37 years old. You shouldn't expect him to carry a line alone. But he can sure as hell create offense. Now, I ran the numbers, and by running the numbers, I went and saw who, as of today, is considered a second-line center for every team in the National Hockey League, Horwat. Malkin right now ranks 12th among second-line centers in points, 13th in goals, and also you have to consider with these other players, they're on better teams, a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
They have better power plays, a lot of them, and they have better line mates, a lot of them. And it's not even just better line mates, it's consistent line mates.
Yeah.
Even if your line mates aren't, Artemi Panarin, your line mates are consistent, meaning they've been on your line and playing at a level for the entire season. You know what to expect. Meanwhile, Evgeni Malkin, as of right now, would have his second least amount of power play points in his career, with right now 13. The only other year that he had less, he played 33 games.
Yeah, it had to be like an injury year.
And that was in 2020-21. He played 33 games, and I believe he scored, I have it here, I'm pretty sure.
It's like 8 goals or something.
9 points in 33 games on the power play in 2020-21 season. So there's that. And then there's also the fact that the Penguins ranked 31st in the power play. And yet he's still not top half, 12th in points. People don't like when I use analytics. That's not analytics. That's points. Mm-hmm. Not to mention he's 3 points away from being in 8th place on that list.
And that's not terrible. I mean, it's middle of the road and you expect a lot more, but you're taking that. You are taking, considering the team position, considering the fact that started the year with Riley Smith, had a pretty good connection there with Riley Smith. And then that fell to nothing. And then his left wing has been almost a revolving door. I couldn't even tell you who's there now. Michael Bunting. That's how far we've come with Evgeni Malkin and his line mates. Terry Pusanen saw some time there for a little bit on the right side. Now it's Rickard Rakell, who lost cause. And that's where Evgeni Malkin is, where he's obviously still able to perform at a pretty good clip for not having much help around him, either on his line, on his defense, really, or on the power play. So, I mean, you could still see it. He's bringing that gallop, that drive to most shifts. Just nothing's connecting. The speed might be gone a little bit, but you can still see that he wants to take things over. It's just he doesn't have the help to get over the edge.
Yeah, and here's the thing. I won't sit here and pretend to say that he still has his legs. He doesn't. But he can still create offense. I mean, you see why Michael Bunting has immediately become one of the better players on this Penguins team. It's because he performs well and he fits well with Evgeni Malkin. You see what happens when he gets good line mates. Like I said, he can't carry a line anymore, but he'll be able to create offense if you surround him with the right pieces. And that's what Kyle Dubas is tasked with. And that is why I'm not concerned about the last 2 years of his contract, because at $6.1 million, if he's going to put up, which right now he's on pace to 7 points in his last 11 games, I could see him doing that and getting to 60 points once again with an inept power play that basically didn't add to his totals at all this season. So, is there immunity wearing off? Maybe a little bit, but at the end of the day, they're not going anywhere. I still don't see a scenario where Kyle Dubas walks up to either Evgeni Malkin or Kris Letang and asks them to waive their no-move clause at all. It's a similar situation to Mike Sullivan, where if they want out, then Kyle Dubas might grant them that wish. But again, I don't see them wanting out anytime soon, especially when you look on Instagram and you see Evgeni Malkin starting to sell hats with Crosby and Letang. They're in it for the long haul now. They're business partners as well. So, I think that the downfall of Evgeni Malkin is exaggerated. The downfall of this core is exaggerated. And I think it's a lot of people piling on because of one bad season that is caused by primarily people that are around them and not them in general.
Yeah, there's going to be all that discussion because a lot of it also boils down to as well of the goal is to get younger. Well, these guys are all over 35. And immediately, that's where a lot of the discussion is going to come from too. And yeah, like you said, I don't foresee Kyle Dubas coming to any of those guys and saying, do you want a new situation? Because first of all, it'd be stupid for Kyle to do that, because then that kind of, as a human, then all of a sudden their minds start going different directions. If they want out, though, it's going to be up to them to go to Kyle. That's the way I would see it. It's going to be up their choice. And, if that day should come. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. I obviously don't foresee that happening either. So we'll see. I could see Mike Sullivan going to them and saying, hey, are you okay with taking a reduced role? Because by God, we need to have you take a reduced role. And again, that is just a discussion to have into next season. That's not one to have now because at this point, lost cause.
Not only that, you need to have people that are going to step into that role. Yeah. And while you might have Carlson on the right side, you don't have anybody at the center ice position right now.
Yeah. So, and even then, I think at this point, you'd still put Kris Letang as the one top right-hand defenseman over Carlson at the moment.
Because he plays defense.
Yeah. So,
so there's that.
But that'll be all a discussion for next season, and they'll be around. That's all there is to it. I could foresee a day where the bottom six is centered by Crosby and Malkin, and there's studs in the 1C and 2C.
I don't even think that Crosby's gonna regress to that level.
I don't either.
I think that if he reduces to a second line center, I think that would honestly at this point still be surprising.
Oh, well, depending on how quickly that happens, yes.
Yeah, I mean, maybe when he's 45, but we'll end up seeing that. But we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, let's talk about people under the age of 30. Let's talk about the pool party taking over the NHL right now for the Penguins. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, brought to you as always by insidethepenguins.com. He's Horwat. I'm Brlansky. Let's talk about some young Penguins because, well, we got some young Penguins to actually talk about here. The pool party, as we talked about with them a couple months ago. Sam Poulin, Jesse Puljujärvi were tearing up the AHL, and we said, how long before we see the pool party at the NHL level? Well, we saw it on Tuesday to a pretty solid debut for Sam Poulin on the 2024 season. They end up being a large part of the Penguins' 4-1 victory over the Carolina Hurricanes. You add in Jonathan Gruden laying a major hit, getting into a fight. These guys are giving a little bit of life to the locker room. You heard a couple of guys say it yesterday at practice, Horwat. What have you thought of the pool party with Puljujärvi coming back the last two games and looking pretty good, and Sam Poulin giving it a little extra jolt as 4C against Carolina?
I think the Sam Poulin thing is such a feel-good story. That was almost number 16 months away from the NHL roster. Only had 3 games the first time, and then to come back in that much time later and not look out of place, even as a fourth line center, he still looked solid. There's still some steps and some progressions to make. I could see him being a winger in the near future. That's such a good feel-good story that you can't help but be happy for the kid, and he looks like a completely different human being too. Just the smile, I don't think has left his face. It's incredible. So seeing the personal and physical, leaps he's taken has been awesome. And as for Jesse Puljujärvi, I mean, he's playing his rear end off. There's no doubt that he wants to stay in this lineup and has what it takes to stay in this lineup. Mm-hmm. I know people always discuss this team getting younger. Kyle discusses this team getting younger. Jesse Puljujärvi's young.
25.
He's 25. He'll have some time ahead of him. I get that maybe you wanted to take this year a little slower because you were trying to still organize the lineup a little bit. After a while, it became a lost cause. There's no use in threatening something severe with someone who's coming off of the kind of surgery he did. But he's looked good whenever he's been in the lineup. He continues to get better. He plays with a bit of an edge too. He likes to throw the body around a bit. Mm-hmm. There's no point in taking him out now. Really, it's the way it is. Unless there is some sort of threat that he could hurt himself again, but none of that is really reared its head. So I'd say it's a matter of keeping him in the lineup, seeing what he can do, and then he is absolutely in a top 12 spot next year.
Oh, 100%.
Lineup. Yeah. What's fun about those three taking over on the fourth line too is I look at it and I go, okay, that's a fourth line you can play a bit more than 5 minutes, 6 minutes. Mm-hmm. You're looking at the idea, but you're rolling 4 lines again. If the third line can find something at all ever again, and that fourth line continues to do what it's doing, you're rolling four lines, and that's what this team has missed.
Yeah, and especially I think the matchup on Tuesday warrants that as well. You look at the Carolina Hurricanes, they're a team that likes to play their four lines as evenly as humanly possible simply because they have that depth. You could match up against it on Tuesday with some young guys that have some offensive upside. Let's not forget Jonathan Gruden's part in this. He's been physical, he's been feisty at the NHL level, but at the AHL level, he's been really good offensively as well. Now, he's not going to be a 20-goal guy in the NHL. I don't think, or I feel pretty secure in saying that that would be an aberration, but he's a guy that has that offensive touch. He's a guy that could be, a step above maybe a Tom Kuhnhackl. I don't know if that's getting generous or not, but I feel like that's the level that he's at. And I do think that we've seen a little bit more offense from him than we saw in those early years of a Tom Kuhnhackl. And he was a good piece to a Stanley Cup team. So I like Jonathan Gruden. You don't need to put the cart before the horse. These guys have had very little NHL experience, Puljujarvi being the exception. But I do like what I saw from those guys. And you mentioned it. Penguins want to get younger. 7 of the 20 players in the lineup on Tuesday were 25 years or younger. That is, I mean, it's not a huge, plan the parade type moment. But considering what this team has looked like and the roster as far as age has looked like over the last couple of seasons, that's when Kyle Dubas says, I want to see this team get younger. That's the early stages of it, and I think that's a great thing for the organization.
Yeah, it was awesome seeing. And not only were that many players under that age threshold, but most of them were noticeable. They were producing something to the game. I mean, John Gruden had that fight. I spoke with him yesterday. I didn't realize how many fights he had in the AHL.
Yeah, he's got an extensive catalog there.
He's listed as 6 foot 170, and then I walk by him and I'm like, you're 5'10". Like, I don't know where you're getting those 2 inches from. Nothing against him.
On skates.
Sure. But I mean, nothing against him. He's a great guy, and I just didn't realize he had that fight card in him. And not only does he have, it's not extensive, but he's got a couple of AHL fights. He's throwing the body before those fights too. Like, they are.
It's all that bull crap, throw a healthy hit, and all of a sudden you have to answer for it with a fight.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. And so he likes throwing the body a little more than I think any of us expected. We just haven't seen it really at the NHL level. That's all. I mean, no one's watching AHL games intently and knowing that. But if he can bring that edge to the NHL level a little more and we start to see it a little more, then suddenly there's an edge there. There's a physicality there that this team has missed. It's why I've been praising John Ludwig all season, who, by the way, is the youngest player on this roster. So remember that if you're talking the age thing. That's a good addition. And then Pusanen continuing to find assists somehow, some way. They're awesome. Dude needs to score more, but I think for the rest of the season, we're fine with just however it goes. We'll find progress next year.
He's a rookie.
For sure.
Yeah, he's a rookie. It takes a while. A rookie 7th round pick. It takes a little while to develop knowing where you need to get on the ice to score goals. And I think that's something that will come with time for Valtteri Pusanen. But, to kind of close out the Gruden discussion, you have no need for Matt Nieto. You have no need for Matt Nieto. There's no reason that Nieto should ever play over Gruden again. Like, that's the thing. You wanted Nieto because he brought penalty killing. He brought a little bit of physicality. He brought some speed, a little bit of offense. I'm describing Jonathan Gruden, but older and more injury, and coming off of a major injury. So there's no purpose of having Nieto come in over Gruden, especially the remainder of this season. At this point, there's no reason to put him in the lineup. The only player that would take any of these guys out of the lineup, especially considering, Noel Acciari is likely done for the season. Jansen Harkins, who knows where he's at coming off that injury. But again, why rush him back when you have these young guys you want to get time for? It's Jeff Carter. And people are going to hate that. And I understand it. If he comes back next season, I don't understand it.
Yeah.
But at 39 years old, if you want to get younger, and Carter seemingly looking to retire potentially, he hasn't said anything, but I think the writing is on the wall there. At least the writing's on my wall. Sorry, Jeff, if it's not on yours. But, Jeff Carter might get in simply because it might be his last dance. But at that point, maybe Gruden sits. Maybe Riley Smith takes a backseat. Maybe Ricardo Kell needs to take a couple healthy scratches because, you need to see what you have in these young guys. And I would fight tooth and nail to keep them in the lineup over a guy like Jeff Carter. But I understand also it's the end of a potentially Hall of Fame career. He deserves to have a little bit of respect on his name because of that.
Yeah, if the season is a lost cause, truthfully, the mathematics are over. I mean, Money Puck gives the Penguins a 1.4% right now.
And Dubas is very gung-ho about it. He had 2 media appearances yesterday, one on the GM show with Josh Getzoff and one on the Mark Madden show. And on both of them, he was pretty clear that, hey, we have the games in front of us right now that can get us back into the hunt. So
let's see what this percentage rises to if they manage to pull off 2 wins over
Columbus.
The only team eliminated in the Eastern Conference.
Yeah.
And suddenly you're looking at a higher percentage and you're going, all right, let's have this song and dance again. But if it does truly come to an end, then okay, fine. Shove Carter back in at 4C, move Poulin into a wing somewhere.
Yeah.
Not on the 4th line, because we want to see what he can still do. That's kind of my thought process of it. Emil Bemstrom, by the way, also only like 24. Another young guy, if you really are looking forward to the future.
Yeah.
He's already been healthy scratched, so that trend may continue. That you have the lineup spaces available to still play Puljujärvi, Poulin, Gruden. I could see Gruden getting healthy scratched a couple of times just for sake of...
He's also played more at the NHL level this year than a guy like Poulin has.
Yeah, so I could see him taking a couple scratches. But yeah, it's if you need to put Jeff Carter back in for the Swan Song, by all means, go ahead. Genuinely, the dude could have a Hall of Fame career. It might take some time to get there. So yeah, I could see that, but that'd be it at this point, because we don't know if Noel Char is coming back. We don't know the Nieto update. We don't know the Harkins update. You have
there's 3 weeks left in the season, and sorry, there's 3 weeks left in the season, and those 2 guys haven't even touched the ice. Nieto's coming off a lower body injury. He hasn't touched the ice, at least as far as I know. You're there every day, so you can correct me if I'm wrong.
He's skated a handful of times, but never with the team. And
never consistently.
Yeah, and I don't know what has been up since. I don't know if he's even still skating, so who knows?
Yeah, so maybe they shut him down and just haven't said anything. Who knows? Obviously, keep an eye on that. You're there. So, I entrust you, Horwat. But the other name that's on that list for young guys that the Penguins wanted to give a shot this year, Vasily Ponomarev, looks like he's going to be out 8 to 10 weeks, according to Kyle Dubas on the Mark Madden show yesterday. So you're not going to see him, unfortunately, at the NHL level this season. You're going to have to wait to see him in training camp and see if he fights for a spot. As far as Dubas is concerned, he had a lot of things to say when it comes to players getting an opportunity next year to make the team out of camp, younger players. Pickering's name was involved in that. Jaeger's name was involved in that. So it'll be interesting. We'll see what happens in a couple months. Obviously, time can change a lot of things. Who comes in and who goes out in the offseason can change a whole heck of a lot of things. So we'll keep an eye on everything there. And obviously, that's a storyline to follow as the offseason begins to unfold. But there's one other young player that we really didn't mention in that segment that I think deserves some shine. We'll talk about him in our final segment after the break. Welcome back to the Tip of the Iceberg podcast, brought to you as always by InsideThePenguins.com. We mentioned a lot of young players in that last segment, many of them, majority of them, being forwards. But there is one defenseman who has come up and has been faced with some very difficult challenges in his first 3 games as an NHL player. And he's stood tall for the majority of them, including a game in which he looked very, very good against the Carolina Hurricanes. We're talking about defenseman Jack St. Ivany, who is now getting set to play in his 4th NHL game later this evening if he draws into the lineup. But you look at his first 3 games, it's a pretty intense, docket for Jack St. Ivany at Dallas, at Colorado, at home against Carolina. Some tough challenges. And like you mentioned about Poulin, St. Ivany has not looked out of place at all.
No, he hasn't. And I said this to you beforehand, too. Just, you want to know how I know he hasn't looked out of place? I haven't noticed him. As a third-pairing, defensive-minded defenseman, I haven't seen him make too many mistakes. I've seen him, make some really good plays with the puck, actually. So nothing super egregious to write home about. Nothing super, over the top to write home about. So it's a good start for his position and bringing exactly what he said he could, which is just that steady, shut down defensive mindset. I think I described him to you at least as a early stages Brian Dumoulin, which we'll see how that pans out for him. I mean, that's still very much in the cards because young Dumoulin was a very good defensive defenseman and could play alongside Kris Letang after some time growing. So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see where Jack St. Ivany goes. Kyle Dubas thinks he can fight for a roster spot next year, and absolutely, he's doing it right now. He's already in and will likely stay in for the time being.
This might hurt people's ears, but him and Ryan Graves looked really good together against Carolina.
The issue is Graves' contract.
Well, Graves' contract is an issue. Yes, you don't want to bury a guy. You can't bury a guy on your third pairing for 5 years. That's just not going to happen. The hope there is obviously that Ryan Graves improves. There's a chance he does that. He's not over the hill as far as age is concerned. He's not 25 and under, but he's not 30 and older either. But you looked at those two on Tuesday against Carolina. Again, difficult matchup, a lot of ice time for those two. St. Ivany finished with 15 minutes of ice time and the most that he's faced in his short 3-game span. 2 hits, 1 shot on goal, and him and Graves together. According to Money Puck, again, fancy stats. 95% of the expected goals, though. That tells you a pretty hefty story. It's not, it's 60%, a little bit more. 95 is pretty drastic. I think that anybody watching that game saw the same thing, and 55% of the shot attempts, not to mention he had the highest expected goals of any defensive pair, him and Graves together, higher than not expected goals comparatively, just expected goals created, more than Erik Karlsson's unit, more than Kris Letang's unit. So again, 1 game sample size. Take it with a grain of salt. But it is nice to see a young player come up and succeed alongside a player that has struggled. But who knows? After whatever happened that took Ryan Graves out of the lineup, I think we all know it, but I don't know who all does. After that, Graves looked good in his first game back. Now, again, you're hoping he builds off of that, but a nice look for St. Ivany and Graves in their first game together.
It helps that here's another pinch of salt to add to your piece too. It helps that Ryan Graves is the one throwing the screen in front of Kochetkov, thank you, on Puljujärvi's goal. It helps
all of it. He set up the breakout too, so I'll give him that.
That's true. That's fair. But it helps that Ryan Graves was a blue liner playing in the blue paint for that goal. So that helps with those numbers too. But still, yeah, absolutely. If you're going to have those sort of numbers, because when it comes to defensive pairs, they're not going to score a bunch. So it's hard looking at the counting stats and going, here's how good they are. You're going to need those underlying numbers. Yep. I think that's where analytics, at least can be really useful, is knowing what defensive pairs are really good together, what is working defensively and what's not, because it's the only way to track defensive metrics like that, unless you just look at blocks, which even for defensemen can be weird.
Yeah, it can be very weird. And here's the thing. We tout the argument between analytics, hard numbers, eye tests. Use it all. We encourage you to use it all because it all paints the picture of the story of what happened on the ice. Obviously, it's important to watch the games, and that's why we both watch. Well, you're at every home game, watch every single game. We watch, I think, combined, probably have watched 98% of the Penguins hockey this year. So, we might have missed a little bit, but we watch a lot of it. So that always comes into our opinions. Analytics helps tell the story. Hard numbers help tell the story. The storytelling of talking to these players, which Horwat does each and every day, that helps tell the story of where they're at, why they're performing this way. So, that's the last thing we'll say on this one. Is just, we encourage you, look at everything, take everything into account. It might be difficult. That's why we're here. We try to do it. And if you don't like our opinions, because that's all we're doing is giving you our opinions, that's fine. That's why there's a comment section on YouTube, and a lot of you use it, and I love you for it. So that's it for this one. Honestly, before we go, I do want to ask one last thing. Do you think Jack St. Ivany makes the team out of camp as of right now next season? I know it's hard because you don't know who's coming in, who's going out. Do you think he has, what % chance do you think he has to make the team out of camp next year?
It's over 50, I'd say, considering the just lack of right shot defenders in the organization. Because you're saying without predicting who may come in, kind of just with what the organization looks like right now. Yeah, absolutely. Because there's no other right shot defenseman that can squeeze into the lineup, and he's honestly a solid choice. If he can really stand out in these next couple of games, it doesn't have to be for the rest of the season. If he can stand out for these next couple on that adrenaline rush and then maybe find a good rhythm after that, yeah, absolutely he can. By the way, for what it's worth too, since we're doing counting stats, Ryan Graves does lead the team in block shots. Throwing that out there.
There it is. Another part of the story. Now, nobody's going to mistake Ryan Graves for having a great season, but, you know, we'll obviously have to discuss a lot of that as the summer goes on. But that's going to do it for this episode of The Tip of the Iceberg. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Remember, you can find us on YouTube at Inside the Penguins, or if you want to listen to us and not look at us because I'm wearing a nice Pirates jersey or it has a beautiful Pirates hat on, so you can check us out on YouTube. That'd be grateful. But if you don't want to look at us, which I understand as well, because, you know, I got a face for radio, I get that. Check us out anywhere you get your podcast from. But that's it for this one. We'll see you guys next time.